fill in the gaps.
Yeah, that sounds good, and definitely do what you need to do. If you need to jump off, no problem. I think we should have a good recording of the meeting tonight, and you know, if I need to help you out with some of the notes and fill in some gaps, I'm happy to do that. So definitely do what you need to do.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Barb. How's it going?
Really good. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
It's going to be great. We got snow on the 2nd of January.
That helps.
I know, for sure. By the way, thanks for sending me the link. I couldn't find it again. But, you know, I'm trying to go back and find it. So
yeah, absolutely. We have kind of had it set up so that, you know, the information goes out, but then to get the password, folks reach out. Outside of the commission, folks reach out, and yeah. I'm happy to provide it to anyone, obviously, but I think we're just trying to provide some level of screening for, I don't know, I've heard that even at some of these local meetings, there are some issues with, you know, yeah, folks joining and causing disruptions from time to time.
Well, I wasn't going to do that.
No, that's why I am happy to provide you with the information. I just mean, if the information is published, it sounds like sometimes people who, you know, may or may not even live in the area will jump on and do some crazy thing.
I think at the beginning of this whole Zoom kind of thing, you saw that happening a lot.
Yeah.
You know, at some of town meetings, and you know, selectmen's meetings and stuff like that. So I think we're safe. Who would ever go to a conservation committee meeting?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know. I did hear, I think Mike Duflo said that it did happen at a school board, Jackson School Board meeting.
Oh, yeah, I heard that.
Yeah. So I guess we're not totally immune, even on a small town level.
I know we're supposed to be trying to conserve energy, but I hope everybody's keeping their lights on so that it can be a happy, happy, happy winter.
So Barb, I think we're going to have a fairly thorough discussion about the recommendations that you sent over. I think I CC'd you on a couple of the emails that went out that had some of the comments, you know, that had already been compiled.
Good.
By the commission. So
that's great.
Yeah, I think we'll have some discussion, and then, you know, at some point vote to support which ones we do support.
Whatever we can do together is only going to be better than it is.
Right. Hey, Dick, how are you?
Is that Mr. Bennett?
It
Can I
is.
see him?
Just like that. It's almost magic.
Some folks are starting to trickle in here. All right, 3839054. Is that Hank?
That's me, Pam.
Oh, Pam. Okay, hi, Pam.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing?
Good. How about you?
Very well, thanks. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Sorry, I should know your
New
number
Year.
at this point.
Happy better year.
Absolutely.
We can hope. Just to let everyone know, I think we're going to have a few, several folks attending from the larger public tonight. And so when the actual meeting starts, I'll probably put everyone on mute, and then, if you'd like to speak, you'll just have to unmute yourself.
That's a great idea.
If I may make a suggestion, there's a hand raising function. If you look, there's an option to raise your hand. I think there might be a way to use that to indicate who would like to speak, and you could unmute on that basis.
That's a good idea. I don't know that I've used that before. Will, can you tell me where someone find that?
Well, I'm on my mobile phone right now. In order to bring up the option, I tap on the screen, and there's on the bottom of the screen, there's the options to mute, unmute, start or stop video. And then on the bottom right, there's one for more options. And on the top of that list, it says raise hand. I'm going to try that now, actually, and see what you see. And we can see like what that does. So on my screen, where it would show my recording, there's a hand symbol now.
I see that. Yeah.
So, I guess if
Where do you see that?
again, it's probably different on my phone because I'm using the phone's user interface and not a tablet or a computer.
That's probably why you're getting the hand thing, because if you're on computer, we can raise our hands if we're on Zoom.
There is that too, of course. If you are sharing the video, of course, that's definitely an option.
Okay, well, we'll just see how it goes. I think people can unmute.
All right. Yeah, it was just a suggestion, but it's a thought, maybe.
Yeah, thanks, Will. We'll see how things go.
All right.
I think it's going to be a bigger group, but not so large that we can't all find a turn to speak. So we'll see. All right, so we have Mike and Pam and myself. Ben is joining now. And Brian. All right.
Right. You're also on. Your audio was on. To take the audio, mute yourself.
What does that mean?
Mute yourself.
How?
Go to your box.
Ken is joining. So I think it's just Tom that we'll be waiting on here. But should be able to go ahead and get started momentarily. Just to repeat something I said a few minutes ago for everyone here, it looks like we have a little bit larger group tonight, and so I may go ahead and mute everyone except for the members of the Conservation Commission as we're kind of just proceeding through the agenda, and then when it's time to go through public comment and open it up for discussion, folks can unmute to ask questions or provide comment as necessary, but just to reduce the amount of background noise. And just as a heads up for all of you that are joining from the public. All right, well, I'd say let's go ahead and get started. I think we're still waiting on Tom, but I see Brian, Mike, Ken, Pam, myself, and Ben, so I'll keep an eye out for Tom, but otherwise we've got a quorum and got quite a few things or at least some bigger items to get through tonight, so we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll call the meeting to order, and we'll go ahead and start with a review of last month's minutes. I believe I sent them out with the agenda. I can share them on my screen for a couple minutes here. Did anyone have any suggestions for edits?
I'll move to accept them, Jeff.
That was Ken?
Yes.
All right. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Brian. So I'll just go through the roll call of commission members. It's a little bit tough because we don't well, let me see if I can expand this so I can see everyone. Mike,
Yes.
all those in favor? Mike, Ben,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes,
Pam,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So minutes are approved. Let's see. Next item on the agenda, I thought we could hopefully quickly just get to the annual report and get that approved so we can move on to some other things. I sent it out about a week ago. I know Ken had some comments and edits that he made within the Google Doc, and also provided a couple of photos. Pam made one comment and I made an edit associated with that. Did anyone else have any comments for the annual report? I'll add those photos in and send it off to the town. It's all set, but happy to make any edits.
Hey, Jeff, I have some photos I can send to Julie, and I'd usually just let her pick.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that works for me. Would anyone like me to share the annual report on my screen for a moment, or any members of the commission have any comments or edits on that? I can pull it up briefly here.
Jeff, I'll just move that we approve them. And, you know, if you decide to make any last minute tweaks, you should have the flexibility to do that.
Okay, great. So Ken's moved to approve the annual report. Do we have a second for that?
I'll do it. I'll second.
All right, Mike seconds. Any further discussion?
No.
All right. So all those in favor, Ben,
Yes.
Mike?
Aye.
Brian?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes,
Pam?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, so the annual report has been approved. I'll get that buttoned up and sent to Julie.
I have a question.
There's a question, Dick. Yes?
If there aren't 7 members at a meeting, you have a quorum, but you don't have 7 members, would I be a voting participant?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't believe so.
Okay, I think we'll, when it comes time in March to, I don't know, who's going to re-up? I don't know what the schedule is for your members, but we may go for 6 members because I don't see that whoever is the select member of the board or participant, no, not participant, not a member. Anyway, if there is a selectman that tries to be available for the Conservation Commission, I don't see sitting through the meeting as a spectator. So you may want to think about who you put forward. I know on the planning board, I am a full member. I don't see where that would go astray for the Conservation Commission. So anyway, it's something to think about. Hi, Joyce.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't have any opposition to that, and I can see why it would make sense to have a selectman's representative on the Conservation Commission. The discussions that have been had previously were just surrounding the fact that within state statute, it specifies that there are to be 7 voting members of a Conservation Commission at a maximum. And in the past, the selectman's representative has not been a voting member, I guess, unless that selectman's representative was also appointed as a member of the Conservation Commission. So that could be something to consider when it comes time. But that's what I'm aware of as far as the history goes.
And Dick, you're
Okay.
the only selectman who's actually attended the meetings.
I missed
Dick, I was saying that you're the only selectman who has ever attended the meetings. I mean, occasionally I think Thompson came, but you're the only one, and I've been on the commission a while. What do you think, Brian?
No, I agree. Bob came when we needed him to, I'd say.
Yeah.
I understand that that was the protocol up until I said that I would do it because I think it's important that both for the commission and for the select board to have that liaison. So anyway, I just brought it up. I don't think it's unworkable, but it's an idea. We'll deal with it in March, I'm sure. Who is up for reappointment?
As far as I know, I think just Tom Seidel.
Okay.
So sounds like a.
Well, you can have an alternate, an alternate that would attend all the meetings, would vote if there was not a full 7. It's different from the quorum. I understand that 4 is a quorum, but if you don't have all 7, the alternate can be a voting member, and you still get to be heard at all the meetings, as you allow me to be heard at all your meetings.
Okay, well, yeah, like I said, I don't have any opposition to that. I could see why it would be logical, and happy to keep talking about it, and when it comes time, make that move if we can.
Or we'll check on it if I was an alternate member and there wasn't a 7-person
Right.
in attendance, then I would vote, and that would solve that. Anyway,
Voting.
thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Dick. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the Save Jackson Falls Committee recommendations, which were forwarded to me by Barb and Emily on behalf of the rest of the committee, and represent those recommendations that they plan to bring forward, I believe, to the select board, and have now requested that the Conservation Commission review and vote to endorse or recommend any or all of the recommendations that they've made. And so I did send this out about a week ago to the commission, and there have been some conversations ongoing over the past several days. And so what I did was I tried to incorporate some of those comments into a working document here, and I thought that it made sense for us to basically use a good chunk of the meeting tonight to discuss some of those and talk about which ones we as the Conservation Commission feel comfortable endorsing. And then the Save Jackson Falls Committee, I believe, plans to bring those on to the select board with our support. Emily or Barb, I don't know if either of you want to weigh in and correct anything that I just said, but I think that's the summary of what the Save Jackson Falls Committee is looking for. Barb, I'll unmute you real quick. I clicked ask to unmute, so you should have an option to.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm just interested to see exactly, what you've come up with as well. And it's really important that both of our committees really work very closely together before we actually bring something to the selectmen. And I'm sure there are going to be lots of questions, but this is it's really a baby step kind of thing. And I'm just looking forward to it. So thank you.
Okay. So is everyone seeing the working document that I had started here on my screen?
Yes.
Yeah,
So go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, just before we proceed, Barbara, this is a question. There was going to be some further correspondence with New Hampshire DOT And that, I think, had to do with the 25 feet out and so on and so forth. Just what's the status on that?
I do not have it in writing, but I have been in contact with Brian for a while. And he strongly, looking at the parking situation the way it is now with the drive-in parking, almost every vehicle is out on the road. So it's certainly not within the 25 feet, especially when you get the bike racks on the big SUVs and everything else. So the DOT would really, that would not be a good thing, for them. Also, as soon as the weather breaks, Brian and I are going to go up to the Upper Falls, and we're going to measure out the 25 feet from the road there as far as possibly creating that corner as residential parking only.
Thank you.
And Ken, just to follow up on that, and Barb, Julie Hoyt forwarded me an email from George Howard, which had some information about this specific subject, and I can't personally, vouch for the accuracy of this information, but it says responsibility for Carter Notch Road was transferred from the town to the state some years ago. My best recollection was in the 1940s and 50s. To my knowledge, there were no restrictions or concerns on the parking at the falls included in this transfer. While the 2018 comments by the road agent and police chief are technically appropriate, parking has continued unabated and not changed from the historic parking pattern, seemingly void of state concerns. Hence, given the historic use of the parking, the comments hold no merit. And I don't know exactly what comments he's referring to there. Then he goes on to say, falls continue to provide an attraction for our tourists as they have for many years. It is in town's best interest to continue to provide and manage adequate parking through identifying parking spaces and appropriate enforcement to achieve tourist expectations. Hence, I suggest the Save Jackson Falls Committee proceed to identify the parking requirements as suggested earlier, coordinate with state agencies, and set in motion for plans of successful 2021. So I think Barb, you're essentially doing what he suggested there. When I read it earlier, I thought maybe there was some more pertinent info, but it kind of sounds like it's
really not. George uses an awful lot of words to say very little things, and I've had long conversations with him. One of the most important things for us to recognize too is that we have been also in touch with, through Julie, a little bit higher up on the DOT. And they're very anxious to work with us on this because they're very aware of what is going on. And in all actuality, and I think we've already brought this to everybody's attention, is that way back in the days, Frank DeFurgio and Dee McClave and that whole select board, that was the time in the early 90s, we believe, that parking went from parallel to facing in parking. And that decision was made by the selectmen. It was not made by the DOT. It was not made by anyone. But back then, no one had the vehicles that they have now, which are really so interfering with the safety, first of all, on the road. I mean, they're out in the road, even blocking, one sort of thing. So the DOT is very, very anxious to work with us. And I think we can only go in the right direction that way, with everybody working together.
Great. Thanks, Barb. I guess one thing that I want to say that was a general comment brought up by a couple folks on the commission, just in looking at these recommendations as a whole, is what the commission's role with regard to both these recommendations and the management of town properties is. And we've discussed this, I think, for a couple of different issues over the past couple of years, where there seems to be a little bit of a gray area in terms of our ability to define exactly how certain things are managed and approached if they don't relate directly to the conservation goals or the management of that specific property. And so one of the things I think we'll have to navigate as we go through this list of recommendations is which of these really falls under the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction, and which are valid recommendations, but recommendations that the Conservation Commission doesn't really have a role to make. And so I'm happy to have a conversation around that particular subject, but I do think, in my mind, it seems there are some that seem to be outside of our jurisdiction. You know, I think we can certainly encourage practices that will contribute to the conservation of a particular property, but defining exactly how those things are enforced or whether they're enforced, et cetera, seems like a little bit more of a gray area. And there's been a little bit of discussion around that already. So I suppose I wonder, and I'm happy to hear input from anyone else on the commission about exactly how to approach this list. There have been some comments that were made already, but do we think it makes sense to just go through the list and discuss each one individually and whether the Conservation Commission essentially will vote to endorse it?
I think that's a reasonable way to go, Jeff.
Okay. Well, we'll just start there then. We'll start with parking, the section regarding parking. And the first bullet point is increase parking fines to $100.
What are they currently?
I think Barb was speaking.
Sorry, 25,
But,
which is the cost of lunch. And that's for the day.
Oh, I see. Currently 25.
well, I just added that, Brian.
Oh,
You didn't miss it.
I was gonna say, I'm like, wow. You're
Well, for more
crafty.
than one.
Jeff, I on this one, I would recommend that we not put down what the exact amount of the fine should be, but that what our recommendation would be is there's going to be a need for enforcement. And between the selectmen and the police department, you know, they should determine whether it's an increase in the fines or whether it's towing. But nothing's going to work up there if there's no enforcement.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought, and gets back to, I think, what I was saying initially, which is that I don't know if it really makes sense for us to be defining what's a logical amount or not. But certainly encouraging the enforcement of parking that, yeah, that reduces the amount of visitation or parking in areas that are, you know, vegetated and sensitive makes sense to me. So, yeah, encouraging recommendations that contribute to that goal, but specifying exactly the amount, I don't know.
You know, one of the things that I really don't want us to get confused about is the fact that a lot of these recommendations came from a huge amount of people that answered that the questionnaire that we put out, the survey that we put out. And so that's why we were only suggesting these things. But we want to go hand in hand with whatever we can do to preserve all the work that you do. And it will be a combined effort, but we're not asking you to absolutely say, oh yeah, we got to do that. Oh yeah, we got to do that. This is handed to you so that we're hopefully going to be working partnerships so that when we do present it, that we're going to have something really believable and credible to present to the selectmen.
Yeah, Jeff, what I would suggest here is, you know, we're not encouraging enforcement. We're asking the selectmen and the police department to come up with what they think is the best enforcement strategy.
Ken, to answer that question, I did have a talk with Chief Purley when we really even started this. And basically, they don't want to be up patrolling there all the time. But if we do have a problem, they will be there for us. And he totally said that we will support you, but we do not want, especially with the look that everybody is giving to the police this you know, in this era. They don't want to be the enemy of the people. They want to be friendly. They want to be welcoming, as we want to be as a hospitable community to come to, but there has to be some sort of regulation. And in order for us to protect what we're doing. And if it gets to the point that they have to be there, they'll be there. But it will only be if we can't get it together enough to sort of control how much activity there is that is within our power. And it starts with parking. So, you know, it doesn't, we don't, you know what? I don't think any of the people here this year would have ever even blinked at paying $100 for getting fined for being there. It was so overwhelming that it was pretty frightening, and that's exactly why we are where we are today. So these are just suggestions. These came from the survey, and so we want if we can protect what you're doing, that's how we can work together. And then I'm sure we can make some great recommendations to the selectmen that they won't be able to refuse, because it's coming from the people and from your committee.
I think regarding the police, and if there is a problem, if there wasn't a problem, we wouldn't be having this meeting.
Yeah.
So obviously the problem's already there.
You're right, Brian, but the thing is that they don't want to be up there patrolling all the time.
We've talked about it as a problem for the last 7+ years, and now we actually want to do something about it. So if we're all sitting here saying there is a problem, then I hate to say it, but someone needs to enforce the rules, and it's not us. We can't enforce the rules. We can help, help them create the rules, but it's not our job to enforce them. And obviously all the signs and all the different things people have done, if that's not stopping the problem, then the signs and the things that we're doing need to be enforced. So most people don't want to go to a problem spot, but when there's a problem spot and it's your job, that's unfortunately what you have to do until you can get it under control so people respect the rules. And once they respect the rules, you don't have to show up as much. But until somebody forces people to respect them, why would you follow them? That's what they're not doing. They're not following the rules. There's signs all over the place and they're just doing what they want. So you can put up a sign that says $100 fine for doing this, but if no one comes and enforces it, why wouldn't you just do it again the next time?
Brian, I absolutely agree with you, but it really goes beyond that now, because signage means nothing to these people. And if we don't educate people, if we don't put the word out, take the word off of social media that we're a really easy place to get to, and there's plenty of parking, and you can come and spend the day, that is totally against a wild and scenic designated
Right,
place.
but that's further on in our bullet points here. We're only talking about parking right now. That's not, we're not on social media.
I think one way we could think about this is, and again, I don't want to skip ahead, but I think that the idea of that falls host or steward could be that first point of contact. So that way that's someone who's the first point of contact. It's not quite the police yet, but that is how we have someone up there that's helping navigate through this a little bit. And then maybe that is the person that's contacting the police when things escalate to that level. I think that possibly could be, a connection between the two. Because I feel like I understand both points of view of Chief Pearlie saying, hey, I can't be up there 24 hours a day. And I understand our view where someone's got to be up there. Like there has to be some enforcement. So, I don't know if something like that could help be that bridge.
No, I
agree. That's educational too.
Right, you get educational and a helping hand to help you understand the sign.
And the amazing thing that when we talk about rules and regulations, Brian, it isn't just the no parking signs. It's etiquette. It's knowing, It's knowing to not bring your trash in and not take it away.
But Barb, we're on the first line of
I know.
and it's parking. That's all.
Yeah.
We're just trying to get through the first one, which is parking, not social media, not educational part yet. That's all. That's going to come next.
It is hard not to tie them together, but yeah, do we have any sort of consensus on this particular bullet, or does it make sense for us to vote on individual bullets if we have a larger picture view of how to approach all this? I guess what I'm hearing is that we don't really have a consensus on supporting this particular increase, or at least to a
That's
specific
fine.
level.
Well, I think as written, I think what you wrote is, you know, I don't think we should be deciding what that amount is,
Right.
you know?
And that's true. And Brian, that's what that's all about. We're just discussing these things because we need to know where we stand with your commission before we can really bring and that it'll come some from us, some from you. But the more that we have from you is the best. So I'm certainly not arguing with you. I'm just really interested in everything that you guys have to say.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, Barb, because in my mind, you know, while there are some things on here that the Conservation Commission might not endorse or see fit to endorse, that doesn't mean that they're not reasonable recommendations, or that the committee, which has been, you know, designated to provide these recommendations, doesn't still have every opportunity to put those recommendations forward. You know, like I don't personally have any problem with the amount or anything like that, but it just is a matter of whether it makes sense for the Conservation Commission to support the exact language.
Well, Eon, and I am getting a little bit confused of what's being asked of the Conservation Commission, but
Yeah.
The parking, and there's two major arguments that I hear on parking. One is to use it as a method to try to control the number of folks there. And the second thing is safety. And the Conservation has to pay attention to safety, but at the same time, if it's parking and road safety relative to, you know, traffic going through, that becomes more than the Conservation Commission's responsibility. And that's part of the reasons why I made the recommendation that I did, which is we're not specifying the amount. That's up to the select board and the police to determine whether it should be $25, $50, or $100, or whether they want to revert to something like towing, whatever method that they need to enforce. But I would also point out that the town all winter has a no roadside parking ban. And this really is not much different than that as to how it is or is not implemented. This is nothing brand new.
Mike, did you have something you were going to say there?
Well, only that I could see maybe what it sounds like we're saying is that, you know, we're not necessarily recommending or encouraging enforcement, but we are recommending, based on what we've heard from the town people, is we're recommending a greater presence by the town to be at the falls. And maybe that's through towing, maybe that's through police, maybe that's through a volunteer host, but it sounds like what's needed is a greater town presence during those heightened peak use times. And that's a recommendation that I would feel comfortable making. I don't feel very comfortable talking about public safety, talking about parking fines, because I don't know anything about that. I don't know if you increase the parking fine by $75, if that does anything. I have no idea. Or, you know, I don't know. I'm not an expert in public road safety, but I do feel like it sounds like we need a greater town presence there. And I'd be comfortable making that recommendation to the select board and then coming up with some options. Like, you know, maybe it's police, maybe it's volunteer host, maybe it's towing. You know, what does that look like?
I like that.
You know, I have no problem with the parking, because I think the parking, it relates to the controlling the number of people, which then goes back to preserving the area.
But when you're saying parking, you're meaning limiting number of
Yes.
parking spots, not
Yes, limiting.
safety.
And I think you limit the parking by, you know, whatever means, you know, the committee and the selectmen and the town decide that however they want to do it, whether it's increasing the parking, having, you know, towing zones, that sort of thing. Improving the parking sign, you know, the no parking signage, not allowing parking on Valley Cross. Those are all methods of hopefully controlling the numbers of people, which is what causes so much of the erosion at the falls.
So
Go ahead, Emily.
can I speak? So on this whole section, I think having something in terms of, and what you brought forward in the beginning, who is ultimately responsible for these things, that if there is the fact that, take out the $100, what you just added in there, Jeff, as a comment, keep that in there, but that bring this forward, and the responsible party is select board and the police. And again, these are recommendations. They're already finding people. So, the amount can be decided, but just to get to that aspect, that the enforcement would be on the town. I do think too, in terms of the presentation of this to the select board, that we also just clarify that the majority of people felt very strongly in the survey that education over enforcement, that is the preliminary approach. And so as we continue down through here, that's where it seems like we get into some more of, what is a way that people who are involved with the Falls Committee can support your efforts, like a little subcommittee or group that can help whatever you all are already doing. But also we just want to be really acutely aware to not duplicate efforts. So, maybe the parking thing, if this looks good, bring that forward, but then always have a responsible party noted on all of these different actions as we move forward.
That makes sense. So for the commission members, does what I've written there in bold summarize what we've discussed and would be okay with kind of amending to or appending to the Save Jackson Falls Committee recommendation on behalf of the Conservation Commission? Conservation Commission doesn't specify the exact amount, but recommends that the select board and police department develop a greater presence and effective enforcement policy.
And I would remove the word greater presence. I mean, they were up there, I think, trying to make a strong effort this summer.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't change the fact that if there is finite parking and there's only legal parking at certain locations, that's not the role of the Conservation Commission to enforce. That's something for the police department to enforce.
Okay, so develop presence and effective enforcement policy.
Yes.
And my thought here, as far as voting on these, is that we can, for each section, basically finalize the language as I've done for this particular bullet, and then at the end of that section, vote to approve all of those in that particular section. Does that make sense?
And I mean, obviously, if the parking gets like it did at times this summer, where they were parking on private land and everything else, then obviously the police have to step in. I don't see that the police has to be there every day. I view this somewhat like speed limits. They're not out there measuring the speed everybody drives by, but at the same time, you gotta be out there enough to get the word of mouth out that this is serious and not just, the social media will start to move that information if it is enforced.
All right.
I know that.
Go ahead, Dick.
Well, I know that one of the reactions from Chief Crowley will be, I can keep a officer up there all day long, but the police budget is going to go up. He is constrained by his budget and trying to put an officer on duty at all the critical times. So yes, we have a whole town to look after, and that's one of the hot spots. So I think your wording of, create a presence and the enforcement of the rules is a great way to approach it with him. But you know what I mean? He's going to say, okay, we'll hire another man, and that'd be, $75,000 a year, or for the summer, it'll be $35,000, for a part-timer or whatever. But anyway, all of it costs money. So we'll have to work really closely. And the other thing would be to discuss it a little bit with Wentworth, because when we limit the parking up there, they're going to get the impact down the road.
Right, and I guess just to follow up on your first comment, I think that gets back to what Mike and I think Emily have pointed out, which is that most folks have indicated that they'd rather see education and then enforcement as a second measure. And obviously there does need to be that step, but that's why I think the develop the effective enforcement policy. It doesn't necessarily mean have someone there all the time, but work with, you know, the committee, and, you know, if there is a falls host program developed, work with that program to figure out what makes sense.
Those are excellent, excellent avenues to approach it.
All right, so can we move on past that bullet with the languages I've written there? I think some of the others will be a little bit more straightforward, but we'll see. So the next one is improve no parking signage to make less unsightly. I think that makes sense.
I think there's been progress made in that direction already.
Does anyone have any issue with that particular recommendation, or can we, as the Conservation Commission, support that?
Good with me.
I guess a quick question on that is it the type of signage that is unsightly, or just the number of it, the wall of signs, which is what people were reacting to? Or is there a requirement, a DOT requirement on signage along roadways that needs to be met? That I guess it's a little ambiguous as to what is unsightly specifically.
I can't say for sure, or I can't speak for everyone, but I guess my understanding would be that the number of signs and the types of signs, and just something that's a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, but still effective. And that's a hard line to draw, obviously. So I'm not
Actually,
sure.
we, DOT, we have to go to DOT whenever there's any kind of signage. You know, permanent signage that's put up. Every one of those horrible, horrible no parking orange signs that we rode by, it was like a parade going up the road. That was done out of total desperation, I'm sure, by the police department. I don't know who actually put them up. They did. And, you know, probably our road agents did, but it was at their request because of the amount. It was just so unsafe. The number of people that were just parking in people's driveways and on the side of the road, and making it totally, if you live on Carter Notch Road and you were trying to get home in the afternoon, it was literally one lane with people waiting on the opposite side, on the castle side. Can you imagine pulling up in the castle's driveway, of course, just waiting for someone to leave? And if a fire truck had to get up there, it would have been ridiculous. It would have been absolutely ridiculous. But I think that this type of signage, all the orange signs and everything else, that was what was so offensive. You're looking at a beautiful Jackson Falls, which you couldn't see because of the number of people there. But the signage was horrible, and there should be no reason for us to have to do that if we've educated people that you just don't park there.
Yeah, Barb, you keep hearing the word educate people, but I just know when I work with AMC,
You're right. You're right.
50 to 60% of your visitors every year are brand new, and education is a useful tool. But I think you want to be careful about thinking about how much it actually can do, and particularly when you're dealing with a transient public, which is what we're dealing with here. We have a number of repeat people here, but we have a lot of new people that come every single year. And that education isn't going to work until somebody goes out and gets them to change their behavior. But I think the question we have in front of us is not to, repeat what the problem is. The question is, what kind of signage do we want?
You want legal signage, and I know there are parameters for legal signs. We could make up, router signs with, brown with painted in yellow that look nice, but I'm not sure if they'll be legal. I don't know that the police department will be able to enforce anything if we don't go with signage. I agree. The amount of signs up there, even now, is part of the pollution problem. So it is something we really have to work on, but I know there is that aspect of it that they have to be legal.
So how about if you add something, improve no parking signage to make less unsightly and better conform with DOT guidelines? There's a little bit of desperation in the spring because of the, all the closures that were happening with COVID. That's why there are so many cones and everything in the beginning. But to conform with DOT guidelines, that might be a way to phrase it.
Yeah, and as Dick pointed out, you can't, if it's not a legal sign, you can't enforce it.
It's true.
So I guess I just kind of provide a check here. I think that if we get into the specifics of exactly how these things are done for each bullet, we're never going to make it through this list tonight.
No.
And so I guess my thought would be, do we agree with the general concept, acknowledging that the details of it are to be figured out at a later date?
Mm-hmm.
So
I
we
can't
would
vote.
CC votes to support with details to be determined based on legal parameters and DOT requirements. How about that?
Love it.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and I would put after it aesthetics.
After, sorry, say that one more time, Ken.
I would just put a comma after parameters, knock out the word and move and till after DOT requirements, and then put and aesthetics.
Everyone okay with that?
Yeah, that's good.
Good. The next one is do not allow parking along Valley Cross Road. Generally, I think the comments that I saw from the commission were in agreement with that. There was one additional comment to say that we should also post no parking signs along there to indicate that it's not allowed.
I think originally a couple of years ago we tried to do that. That's why those big boulders were put there, right? Didn't we originally try and cordon off parking on both sides? I'm not sure what happened, but I remember we had the road agent put those huge rocks there to keep people from parking.
I think they moved the boulders in order to be able to put the porta potty in there.
They did. Which is another item further down the line.
Regardless, I think we all support no parking on Valley Cross Road. Correct?
Right.
Absolutely. That's a fire pond and it's a fire lane and it just shouldn't, there's no room. One of the things that happened this summer though, and it was really unfortunate, is the tennis club it's all posted. You can only be a tennis member to park there. But then that one weekend they had a tournament and the police told them that they could park their cars across, on the road. And there was no one from New Hampshire that was parked on the other side of the road. They used it as as another access. I don't know. We have no place to park. So I don't know. I don't think we should have signs on Valley Cross Road. I love Valley Cross Road. And I don't even know that people from the city know what a fire lane is or a fire pond is.
I think you have to have parking signs on Valley Cross Road, at least after the parking for the fire access.
Yeah.
Well, then you get people parking in Christmas Farm Inn or in the Ski Touring Foundation lot. I think what we're voting here, though, is recommends posting no roadside parking.
Yeah, that's,
Right.
yeah, that's it.
How's that? CC votes to support, recommends posting no roadside parking along Valley Cross Road. Great. So the next one is keep, or I assume that basically just means retain the 2 existing handicap parking spots.
Perfect.
Is the Conservation Commission in agreement that we support that?
Yes.
Yes.
The next one is keeping the fire lane. I think we're all in support of that, unless anyone has any comment there.
Yes.
I don't know what's going on with my bullets here, but I'm working through it. Consider paving lower lot and line for parallel parking. It will decrease number of parking spaces, but addresses safety concerns along the road. Barb Terrio is in touch with Brian at NHDOT to confirm feasibility of this proposal. So I guess the one thing there that would make me hesitate or think we should hesitate to endorse this one is just that we don't know for sure whether whether it's feasible or not yet.
I think we know that it's feasible because if it's more than 25 feet off the center line, then it's up to the town as to what's happening. It's when the vehicle sticks out into the 25 feet, it
Right.
makes it illegal.
Right.
But I don't think it's a feasibility question. It's a question of whether we recommend this or don't recommend it.
We know how many spots we would lose. Does anyone know?
A lot.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I think for me, this one's tied into the next one. So maybe I'll save my thoughts on this because I think they're intertwined a little bit. Because I wish that we had some sort of study that could look at the carrying capacity of how much visitor use is too much use, what's right, what's underuse. Because I would be concerned if we took too many spots away and we're limiting access, especially in regards to the next one. So if we're losing tons of parking spaces and then converting the few that are left to resident only parking spaces, just kind of what that means. So I think I would have to kind of, and I know this is probably an impossible question for anyone to answer right now, but I think something that would be important to me is knowing, well, like how many spaces are we actually losing? So what would be the maximum capacity of cars that could be at the falls currently, legally? What would they be if this were, recommended and acted on?
Mike, I've gone by there enough times to count the cars that are in there when they're head in. And I think there are probably room for 22, 23 cars
no way.
of a normal size. Not the SUVs that hang out in the road, not the campers that drive in and hang out in the road. And so if you take that many spaces and then if you look at what you could do with just, regular parallel parking, you would probably be able to get maybe 10 cars in. So you're not looking at that much loss of parking. But the big thing is the drop-offs, the people that come up and drop everybody off with their coolers and their boom boxes and everything else, and then take off, find someplace else to park, and they walk back up. So it's not, so you look at those cars and you're looking at a number of people that are in those cars, but you're forgetting the people that drop everybody off and then just go park someplace else. And that was what the huge problem was this summer.
In regards to the parking lot, I guess I would also want to make sure that we talked about drainage, permeable, surfaces, I mean, I would just hate to see that just get paved and then have that water that comes down the hill like we already deal with and have to deal with it again, but now in a more, powerful force of water. So
I think that one of the things that we even had said, and I think that's like, is it feasible to be able to do that? Because if you paved, it would be defined, and we're not even saying, we're just asking, and we don't want any further erosion or anything else to go on. But if you literally, I think you could post something, parallel parking only. That's one sign. I mean, not an offensive sign.
I guess my other thought, with just kind of from a general perspective, is that not all of this needs to happen at once, and it's very unlikely that all this will happen at once. And I would be interested to see, with some of the educational aspects implemented, how much of a difference that makes with the, even retaining the existing parking that's there now, and whether it might make sense to approach it from that direction. Implement some of these things, see how it goes for a summer, recognize that more needs to be done, implement a couple more. I'm not sure and how we would define that, but yeah, it strikes me that some of these things may not be necessary if others are effective.
Correct.
But I don't know whether that provides any sort of consensus for how we as the commission vote to endorse or not endorse this particular bullet.
Just looking at the impact of the first couple of articles that we've even talked about, this is something that, you're right, it's baby steps. And we're looking at an overall picture of what could possibly happen, not what's going to happen right away.
Right.
And we have to start somewhere. That's the most important thing. And that's why we're trying to combine our forces with yours to try and find some place to start.
So how about there could be something that the Conservation Commission votes to continue to monitor the parking situation and be aware of and propose possible solutions based on future rate of use and impact? Because I totally understand, Brian, that was my big concern when people were talking about paving. I thought that's going to shoot water right through there. So
yeah.
So just keep it really general, but I think some of these recommendations that came forward from the surveys, just want to make sure that we continue to remember those and we can move forward in subsequent years.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I just think it should be, because the bullet point mentions the word paving, that we should at least have something in there that, as the Conservation Commission, that we would possibly support that, but we would have a concern and would want it to make sure that erosion and protection of, sediment to the river is not increased.
Yep.
I think that you could do parallel parking without paving. What you'd end up doing is just putting a sign where the fence is right now. You put a signpost that says, parking space 1, spaced out parking space 2, and parking space 3. There are ways of doing parallel. I don't think I subscribe to what Barbara's saying. My guess is if you went to parallel parking, you're probably talking about 4 cars, 5 cars.
Yeah. I agree. It's 4 or 5 cars max that way.
I think that if that were something we were to do, like eliminate that high volume number of parking, then we would have to create some sort of unloading and loading area, because I mean that's a lot of space. It's just a lot of spaces.
So I guess the two things that I'm hearing are that we would consider paving the lot as appropriate as long as proper erosion and sediment control measures are implemented alongside that. But that both that and the switch to parallel parking should be considered as future steps based on, you know, additional assessment after implementing other recommendations.
I mean, I guess if we're going to say the word paving, is there a way to phrase an alternative product to paving? You know, it doesn't have to be asphalt.
Hard stone.
Yeah, Jeff.
Does it have to be paving if we can put a fence line in or something like that, and the signs that Ken was talking about? So in other words, if you moved the barrier in so it's clear, it's a narrow space.
Yeah, that's why, Jeff, I think, you know, Conservation Commission would support, well, I don't know whether we support parallel parking or not, because it really does reduce the total number of cars there. But if it was to be parallel parking, I think I would only support it if we're not paving, and I think there are ways to do it.
If we're not paving. Okay.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
You can say that the Conservation Commission would entertain parallel parking in the future, and without describing whether you need to pave or not. And some of this comes around again to if DOT is saying what parking is there currently is illegal because the cars are backed out into the road, then essentially we are forced into parallel parking or bringing in fill to make the parking lot bigger.
Maybe write asphalt pavement.
Or impermeable.
Yeah, exactly.
Or permeable.
But
I think that's perfect. Impermeable pavement.
The pavement idea came up just as seemingly the only way that you could put lines down. So,
No,
certainly,
I agree. I just think if we have time, we could. There's some neat stuff out there.
that's yeah,
It's a small space.
and throw some logs out, perpendicular. Or something.
So CC recommends considering parallel parking in the future based on additional assessments without the implementation of impervious pavement.
I like that.
All right.
Has anybody ever considered angle parking? Just out of curiosity.
We talked about that, didn't we? But we figured there's no way we could have people do it.
Yeah.
Like there was no way we could get people to park the right way without having lines, and we couldn't figure out how to do lines without pavement.
Paving.
I thought maybe we had talked about that a while ago, but I can't remember.
Yeah.
Judging, you know, from, this is just a funny example, but at the Thompson House, when I worked there, you know how everybody would pull in front of the Thompson House? Well, one day somebody pulled in at an angle, and so everybody else pulled in at an angle. So if we had one car permanently parked there at an angle, everybody else would do it.
All right. So the next one is create 4 head-in parking spaces for Jackson taxpayers off of, it initially said Valley Cross Road, but we edited that to say Carter Notch Road. Barb is in touch with Brian at NHDOT to confirm feasibility. And now in initial comments from the Conservation Commission, there was some pushback on this, required some further discussion. And then the other comment that was made was that one way to indicate that the folks in the Jackson taxpayer spots were in fact Jackson taxpayers was to have the transfer station sticker displayed.
So I'll jump off talking about this one because I think I had written that as it stands now, I don't think that I would be in favor of this, but I really wanted to hear what other people thought. And my thoughts about it were when paired with the one above it, and I realize that they're not simultaneous, not in lockstep. But my first thought was that if we're looking at eliminating, 18 parking spaces, and then we're down to, 10 or 11, 10 or 12 total ones, and then we're saying a quarter of those, 40% of those are town ones, that's a big chunk. That makes four spaces a lot more valuable than it did without the parallel parking. So that was kind of the first thing that jumped out at me. And then, the other thing that came to me is that when I was thinking about this, creating those for Jackson taxpayers, it doesn't reduce the number of people. So this is not an ecological issue, right? It's not changing the number of people that can go there. It's a social one. And when I thought about it more, and again, I'm not 100% against this, but when I thought about it more, it made me think a little bit about being a resident here and I think some of the people on the board can attest to this, how hard it is to be a resident in Jackson, like let alone buying a house. Like it's just hard to be a resident, like to find an apartment. And I only did it because I got super lucky and fell into it. And so there's already this kind of, stereotype in the Valley about kind of the elite Jackson, right? That already exists just because it's very hard to become a resident in town. And now the idea of like, okay, well, now we're going to have some town-only, resident-only parking. It just, to me, as a Conservation Commission member, as a resident of the community, I just don't know how I feel about the optics of that. And I fully understand wanting to take our community back and our village back. Community and the town is important to me. It's important that we're a real town and not a resort. But I just, the optics of it and thinking about it, I just don't know if I like the way it feels. So I'm not totally against it, but I just, as of right now, I'm not convinced that we should have resident only parking.
Well, Mike, I have a question for you. Do you bring your children to Jackson Falls during the summer?
No. But that's primarily because I have 3 little kids and that's river moves fast. So it's not a safe place for us to be, like, even if no one went there. If I had high schoolers, I don't know. Maybe. I can say that if there were 4 resident town spots and the falls was busy and I had to park there and I had to use those resident spots, I wouldn't go there anyway. Like if we're that busy, it's just not a place I would go personally. I wouldn't go there if it was that busy, regardless.
I have to agree with Mike in terms of that aspect of, we brought our kids to the falls when they were little. And given the crowds now, there's no way I would take them now. There's just too many people. So I do wonder, I know there was a lot of comments in the survey, in the responses that people were looking for resident parking, but, and a lot, we could look at the actual data on that, but I could see, I totally get that feeling in terms of, coming off is exclusive. And then the idea that we are already reducing the number of lots. But it does happen in other towns. So there is definitely that. There's examples of it happening elsewhere.
Could we, I guess I'd feel comfortable just leaving that up to the townspeople. Is that, leaving it up to the town to vote and say, hey, how do we feel about this? And again, I don't know why. I guess we don't get to make the final call. We're just making a recommendation or not.
I'm also happy to be outvoted on this. I won't have any hard feelings if it's a 6-1. Like
no,
if we move forward, I'm not going to begrudge anybody. That's I don't want this to, I know we don't have to be unanimous. It's awesome if we are, but I know we don't have to be unanimous in these decisions.
No, I hear where you're coming from, and I do agree. It would be weird if there's 5 parking spots for people to park at the Jackson Falls, and then there's 4 for the town. Not that we don't deserve to have a space for people in town to park, but it would be kind of weird if we lost 8 or 9 parking spots. But again, I guess I feel it's it's a thing for the town to vote on. If the people in the town strongly feel that they want to have a parking spot at the Jackson Falls, then I think they should speak up and vote for it.
And if it's as transient as Ken thinks the people that come to the falls are anyway, they wouldn't know that there were more parking spaces last year than there are next year necessarily.
I'm not convinced that you can fit 4 spots up in that corner without taking a number of trees out.
Yeah, maybe it's 2.
I think you're down to, without starting to do a lot of resource destruction to create 4 spaces. I think you could logically maybe get 2 in there that, still fits in with the area. The minute you try to get 4, even head on, you're making a major impact on the aesthetics of that area. So, my thought here is to create 2 head-on parking spaces for Jackson taxpayers. You already know what they think. You put a survey out, and you got the results from the survey. And I would be flabbergasted if you put it up for a town vote, you wouldn't end up with a town vote that says, yes, we should have some site-specific parking for Jackson residents there. But you've got the information in front of us already.
I guess the thing that, and I think this is going back to something that Mike mentioned, that what I keep coming back to on this particular one is that while I am wrestling with, whether it makes sense from an optics perspective and from, I can understand the value that there would be in providing access for folks who live in the town, for sure. But I don't know how that contributes to conservation. And to me, I think that's our role. And whether we as individuals support the idea of creating taxpayer parking spaces, I think is outside of the role that the Conservation Commission has in contributing to the conservation of these properties. And I don't know how creating those parking spaces contributes to conservation.
I agree with that, but I guess if that's how we feel, we'd have to make sure that that space didn't get taken over and just get used for 4 parking spaces. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like if that's what we're doing, we're actually managing it so that there's parking and then there's parking for townspeople.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we end up with, let's just say 12 parking spaces total. But if we end up with 12 parking spaces total and none of them are for the townspeople, I think we're going to have some people that are upset. So believe me, I'm all about the best way to protect the falls is to limit the people going to it. I've been saying that for 6 or 7 years. That's probably why I always seem frustrated talking about this, because it seems pretty simple. But, we make these, we have this idea of what we want, but it seems like we're really never willing to do what it takes to actually get what we want. So at some point you have to take the step or walk away or, research and really think through it and make sure that we're like we're doing now.
Thank you, Brian.
So 79% of respondents to the survey recommended that there's be a designated portion of parking area for resident taxpayer use only. So what about creating 2 head-in parking spaces or 2 parking spaces designated for taxpayers? And again, it'd be an enforcement thing. This is not on the Conservation Commission. Again, who would be responsible? That's a whole nother piece. But again, it's a recommendation to be bring forward to the selectmen and then see what the next step would be. At least it's something that's a step is made.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to respect what the townspeople want, for sure. Or at least if it's in good judgment.
So could we, I guess, as the Conservation Commission, vote to recommend that if there are Jackson taxpayer spaces created, that it be two spaces rather than 4, or that?
Can we look at it and because if we don't know, maybe we don't put a number, 2 to 4, whatever the smart way of wording, you know, something as research the appropriate number of spaces with the allotted space available. I mean, you're the wordsmith.
I would
I think what Brian has said is, Jeff, if we just say create 2 to 4 head-in parking spaces for Jackson taxpayers, the number dependent upon the impact on the resource. Because we don't have the input for DOT, and we haven't gone out there to actually measure out
Mhm.
number really is or is not doable.
So
I like that. I like that wording, and I guess just Emily just mentioned this, but my only concern about this is this just creates another enforcement issue for the people or for the police, that if people aren't respecting no parking signs now, I don't see how respecting a legitimate parking space versus parking on the shoulder, it just brings us back into this enforcement loop that I think has to be a strong, or one of our main messages coming out of this is that we need to have a partner there.
Yeah, agreed. Next bullet point.
Sorry, I don't. Can we take an actual vote on it? I'm sorry. I feel like I need to, and I'm fine. I'm totally fine with it. But I feel like I need to vote no. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that
Can
one
we do an
seems
actual
like it-
vote? Is that
Sure.
okay?
Sure. That one
Sorry.
seems like we should separate that out from the larger slate of recommendations. So I guess why don't we get to this time limits thing? Although it says, you know, time limits hard to enforce, not recommended. So I think generally we don't really need to comment on that one.
Yeah.
So that being the case, we're through the parking section. My thought would be that we have a motion to approve bullets, the recommendations under bullets up to, but not including the head-in parking spaces for Jackson taxpayers. So everything above this line, as we've discussed, with the one separated out to be voted on individually.
Okay.
So I'll make that motion to approve these recommendations. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, Mike?
Aye.
Ben?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Ken?
Aye.
Pam?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. So those I will pass on. I'll formalize them a little bit, Barb and Emily, and I can pass them on to you as basically, like I said, amendments or the CC's comments and recommendations on those that you've put forward. Does that make sense?
Perfect, thank you.
And let's get to the individual vote on this. CC votes to recommend the creation of 2 to 4 Jackson taxpayer spaces with the final number to be determined based on further research. And so I'll go through, I guess, will someone make the motion or make that motion to recommend?
Oh, okay. I'll make the recommendation to create the 2 to 4 Jackson taxpayer spaces with the final number to be determined based on further research.
I'll second it.
Okay, Ken seconded. So all those in favor, Ben,
No.
Brian,
Aye.
Ken,
Aye.
Pam,
Aye.
Mike? It cut out there, but my lip reading tells me no.
No, yeah, no.
And I'm a no. So we're split there, I think, 3-3. So I guess that motion does not carry.
This is when we need Dick.
Or Tom.
Or Tom.
He had a baby, if you didn't hear, by the way. His wife had the baby, if you didn't
Oh,
know.
wow.
I was hoping to say congrats tonight, but seems
What did they have?
busy, I guess.
A little girl, Stella.
Oh,
Nice.
hooray.
Yay.
I think that might be the first time since I've been on the Conservation Commission that there wasn't a unanimous vote. Does that sound right to everyone?
No,
Yeah.
I think we've had votes where people haven't been unanimous.
Okay. Well, that's the way it is, I suppose. I am concerned about the time. It is 8:20, and we've made it through the first section of these recommendations. And so I'm wondering, I guess I'd like to hear some thoughts from the rest of the Conservation Commission. I don't know whether it would make sense for us to schedule an additional meeting to finish this at some point. There are a couple of other things on the agenda that we were hoping to get to. Maybe some of these will go a little bit quicker, but interested to hear your thoughts on how to proceed, given that it's taken us about 50 minutes to get through that first section.
Jeff, I'm game to go to 9. I think we might be able to get through the rest of these, and to the agenda, I think we can deal with it the next.
Yeah, I think that would probably require us to push the Prospect Farm questionnaire review to the next meeting, which I think would be fine. I think everyone has the information that I had compiled anyway and has the ability to go and look through the responses. And so that seems like a good first step. I guess I would ask, is everyone else on the commission okay until 9?
Yeah.
Yep.
Reluctantly. Well, we could hope that it will be before 9, I guess. And maybe that'll give us some motivation to move quickly through these other ones. But why don't we continue and reassess it at 8:45?
Okay.
All right. So
Sounds good.
the next section is review online/social media promotion. Ben, it sounded like you did a little bit of research and didn't really find a whole lot promoting the falls specifically, but did find information talking about limited parking. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, the Chamber of Commerce was mentioned, and they don't have anything specific about the falls on their website. And they do have a TripAdvisor tool that has people reviewing the falls, and their #1 comment on there is that there's limited parking. And I think that if we just are consistent with what our policy is going forward, that will get out to the people who aren't residents or have homes here. I also work in a lot of homes and short-term rental homes where they always have a book of things to do. That seems to be something very easy. We could partner with people, just letting people know that there is a policy here and that they should be recommending that the falls not be used in a way that is a place where you can go and spend all day, or that there's no problems with parking. And so also knowing people in the service industry, that's the one question they're always asked. And the go-to before was always, well, just send the tourists to Diana's Baths, and we see how that worked. And so I know people have tried to disperse people away from there. So I think there are a lot of places for people to go. It's just, I guess if they need to be provided with that information of where there are additional swimming holes or places to go with the family.
Ben,
Yeah.
if I can say something, on going on the regular, if you went on your regular info, Google waterfalls in New Hampshire, you would find that you would get everything from Diana's Bath to Jackson Falls. And when you got to Jackson Falls, you would see free parking and a couple of other, you know, come have a picnic, come stay for the day, all kinds of suggestions. These aren't part of our, you know, like our Chamber of Commerce. This is part of social media. And the amazing thing is that you could go on and they would lead you to one falls. And if that one was full, then you go to Diana's Bath. If Diana's Bath is full, why don't you go to Jackson? It's beautiful. And that's the people that are coming here. They're not staying at hotels. I have been in the hotel business and for a long, long time. And I know at Christmas Farm Inn, we always suggested people walk to Jackson Falls. And they still do. And at the Eagle Mountain House, they still do. But if you go online, you will find that you can get to Jackson Falls and they're advertising it like you can't believe it. It's not us. It's other social media that's doing it. And Ben, it breaks my heart because I just want us off of all of that stuff.
But I guess to the point of this, this particular item here, is this something where the Conservation Commission would support, you know, some members of the Jackson Falls Committee to go out and reach out to the chamber and do a review of social media promotion? Is that something? So I guess this is this scenario where we don't want to make sure we're duplicating efforts. So would you endorse and support review of that, you know, of the online presence and keep you informed kind of thing? Or make sure that any messages we're sending out are run by the Conservation Commission, sort of a, I don't know, PSA online promotion idea. So.
Emily, I think in answer to your question, you know, my guess is it's fairly easy for the Conservation Commission to ask any and all partners to advertise what the regulations are at Jackson Falls.
So that, yeah, so you all would take that on then to reach out to them?
Well, I'm not sure that we're the ones to reach out to all the social media. Some of us are adept at it. Some of us, like myself, don't really pay much attention to social media.
Well, that's where I'm coming from too. So if they're members of the Jackson Falls Committee who would like to you know, do that work, is that something that would be supported by the Conservation Commission?
But I can't understand why the Conservation Commission would object
Okay.
to having people reach out to the public about what the rules are and are not at Jackson Falls.
Yeah, and then looking to you all for any, you know, what information to share. What would you all, that you all could provide information to the social media experts who will identify to go out and see what's up there.
Well, not to be the resident millennial on the committee, because
Could you do it?
No.
Yeah.
And I aged out. I'm not a millennial, so but I'm adjacent. So I know children who are good at this, but I think the things that BT has brought up are things that we have no control over. It's just that's the mass of people talking about the experience they have here, and that experience, you know, they can communicate the things that they have here. I think that a volunteer host would do something like that, and if there needed to be like a permanent social media presence for Jackson Falls, that could be something that would fall well into a a volunteer group.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's kind of two separate things. It's social media, which any individual goes out to the falls and has the ability to post whatever they want about, like you said, Ben, their experience at the falls. And then there's how do various organizations and businesses advertise the falls on their social media pages or their blogs or websites or whatever it is. And I think that it's the latter that we're really trying to control, and I guess, or not control, but influence in some way, such that those advertisements are talking about responsible use of the falls and the fact that there is limited parking and regulation. And so I guess my thought would be, I don't hear any objection to that review and to the outreach to partners and to businesses and to the chamber to try to develop responsible advertising of the falls. So as the Conservation Commission, can we basically make a broad recommendation that we support outreach to various businesses and advertising pages, etc., to promote responsible use and advertisement of the falls?
That sounds
And then
good.
we, as the Conservation Commission, would work with the committee or the town to develop language that would be effective in doing that.
Mhm.
I'd support that.
How's that?
I think you nailed it.
Yeah.
Very good.
All right. The porta potty. My sense is that the CC kind of came to a consensus on this, more or less, or most folks generally support on the Conservation Commission keeping the porta potty where it is. I think Mike, Ben, and maybe Ken stated as such, and maybe Tom as well. Am I correct in my recollection there?
Mine was, it doesn't have to be exactly there, but I just thought highly visible and highly accessible. So if there's like a better immediate spot, then that's fine with me, but just somewhere where it's totally visible, usable, functional.
I think it needs to be down by the large parking lot because people are still peeing in the bushes because they don't know where it is and they don't want to walk that far.
So not at the Jackson Historical Society, or maybe there could be one at the Jackson Historical Society and one up by the falls, but potentially in a better location.
Yeah, I mean, I can't understand how a porta potty at the Historical Society would help the Jackson Falls at all. I mean, no one's gonna lose their parking spot to go use the bathroom down there. So I think it should stay. You know, I don't love it being there, but I think it's definitely benefited the opposite side of the river as one who frequents that side and knows what you don't want to look for. So I think it should more or less stay where it is.
And I would concur as well. I mean, if you looked at one of the biggest issues at Diana's Bath, people were just going into other people's yards. But I do think there is no sign right now, I think, that tells people where the porta potty is right now. But I also think that the porta potty, where it's located now, is aesthetically about as good a place as you possibly could put it. If you put it down where the parking is, you're either sacrificing parking space, but it's going to be a big eyesore.
Ugh.
So, you know, my feeling is you could put a sign down there that says porta up 100 yards or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think if you put it down where the parking space is, I know it's not aesthetic, but it's practical.
Yeah, but
But I think part of what we're trying to do is maintain the aesthetics of the falls.
I'm sorry, as to what, Ken?
and they can't.
Is to retain the aesthetics of the falls. I mean, a porta potty down where the parking is, you're gonna have to sacrifice a parking space.
Well, I was thinking if you used the fire lane and just parked it down, like they could access it and put it right into that area next to the path. You know where the
I think
grass,
the other.
Well,
Sorry.
I want to be a little careful because if you start moving it down close to the river, you're in where it could wash out in a high water event,
High wind flip over.
which forces you to bring it back up close to the road.
Yeah, and the
Maybe-
other part,
maybe that would be a way to reduce some of the parking and still have people parking head in.
I guess my feeling is if it's down by the parking, in some ways you're putting it in a way for people to drive by and see a porta potty and decide, I'm going to go use the porta potty because I see one and I don't know where I'm going to see one again. I mean, if someone's coming to
But they have to find
Jackson
a place
Falls,
to park, is that?
yes, but
I'm just saying
I
that
don't know. If you're coming to the
people told me
Jackson
they saw
Falls-
people pooping in the bushes down by the parking area because they couldn't make it up to the corner. I'm just saying.
you can't solve every problem for every person.
So
I
could there
suppose
be a
my-
recommendation to support it where it is, but improve the signage to get there?
That's what I'm
I
saying.
I like that.
would support that.
Okay, so I see Brian, Mike supporting that. Ben and Ken, where do you stand on that?
Yes.
Yeah.
And Pam?
No.
Okay. It sounds like the majority, and I do personally support that. So it sounds like the majority are supporting CC votes to recommend retaining porta potty where it is, but to improve signage indicating its location. Does that capture it?
Yeah, maybe we should put, but to improve signage indicating its location at lower parking. I don't know. I mean, just
Okay,
so someone
Brian,
doesn't think you're going to put a sign on the corner of the road, porta potty, you know, I mean.
Right. So you're saying put signage down near the parking to indicate that.
Yeah, I mean, if that's where we think people are thinking, oh gosh, it's too far or whatever.
Yep.
Larry Garland mocked up a really nice map for us, and that can be an item right on it. It looks real nice.
Great.
There you go.
That's what I was wondering, if that map had a little square on it.
All right, let's take a
P.
quick vote on that. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, Ben?
What is the motion again, Jeff? I'm sorry.
The motion is that the Conservation Commission votes to recommend retaining the porta potty where it is, but to improve signage near parking indicating location of porta potty.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And so Ben and Brian were both ayes. Ken?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Pam?
No.
Okay, and I'm an aye. So that one does carry. Let's see, 8:37.
Oh, boy. This next one's tough.
Picnic tables. We knew it was going to be a contentious item. I was kind of hoping we wouldn't get there tonight, but here we are. So.
Me too.
All right. There were a couple of comments just over email. I think Ben talked about the possibility for picnic tables to encourage folks to kind of set up camp and stay there for long periods of time. And Ken noted that it is a very convenient thing to have for folks who want to access the falls and you know, have areas to rest and view them in the way that they can. So
Jeff, I would just add that, you know, the alternative is to take the picnic tables out of there and put a couple benches.
I like that idea, and also having it as a fundraising thing. If we needed a way to fund a volunteer host program, is having people or buy benches. Just one way to. I like the idea. You know, people need a place to sit. That should be encouraged. So
I'd make a motion that we recommend removing the picnic tables and replacing with benches.
Brian, thoughts?
What if we put in that we recommend replacing the picnic tables with benches when the picnic tables become, you know, they need to be replaced?
I suppose I don't know how long that would be. I guess it depends on the quality of the picnic tables, but
Just a thought.
yeah.
I personally feel like I'm a little stuck on this one, as in one of the emails I wrote about, you know, the Falls really is a front country park, you know, and as such, you know, you drive by and you see people having picnics outside and really enjoying that, which is one of the purposes of a front country facility. You know, you go to any kind of park and that's a service they have. And so I really kind of torn on it, because if it were just me and my falls, I'd take the picnic tables out. But, you know, as part of having this sort of front country facility, having services that maybe we don't personally agree with, but feel serve a good within the, you know, the setting. So I don't know. I don't feel strongly either way, but I am kind of conflicted about it, because I do think that they serve a purpose. And I think that I do see people enjoying them. So.
Yeah, and I tend to agree on, I'm torn over it. Is it really affecting? I mean, people can hang out all day on the rocks. They don't need a picnic table to.
Right.
The one thing I almost think in my mind, like, okay, if the picnic table's there, at least you know where people are going. I mean, granted, if the bench is there, they're going to do the same, most likely. But would people just decide to spread themselves out on a flat piece of, you know, seeded ground instead and do damage that way?
Well, I mean, that's how we use the falls. I mean, if we're having a picnic, we like to take a sandwich and sit near the water on the rock. So I think that was one of my email comments, was it doesn't remove it, it just disperses it.
Yeah, but it's already dispersed. You know, like, people are already dispersed. I think the one thing that table does is, I don't know. I don't want to say civilizes, but
focuses.
I don't know. I'm torn on that one too. I don't know if the picnic table is actually doing the impact.
What if we
so many people?
What if we go back to Pam's suggestion, which is to retain the picnic tables for the time being, and as it becomes clear that they need to be replaced, consider the benefits or downsides to replacing some of them with benches.
I like that.
I like that suggestion.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I think it would be nice to see some granite benches on a beautiful, granite fall, but I just have to say, I agree with Mike. It is truly a front country park.
And I know that picnic tables bring garbage. I mean, I know they do. I mean, that's something, they attract people to come eat, which then attracts garbage, but I feel like it's a trade-off. And, is it any better if people are bringing their picnics and their food and sitting on a rock in the middle of the river? I don't know. Are they going to be more responsible there than at a picnic table? I don't know.
I don't think so.
I know the soil scientists recommended that we get people off the ground and onto the rocks.
One of my favorite places in the whole entire world is to sit on that bench right underneath the pines, looking at the falls. And that was a bench that was dedicated to one of the original members of the Conservation Committee when it first started. And the only thing that was visible during Hurricane Irene, if you went to the falls that day and saw the surge that was happening in our village when the Wentworth had water in their parking lot and the lower bridge, the stone bridge, was closed, I always called it my island, because I could sit on that bench when I came home from work after a stressful day and go right down to the falls, have a glass of wine and sit on that bench. And that bench made me safe. It was my island. And during Hurricane Irene, I have a photograph, and I'm going to show it to all of you guys because I think I'm going to leave it to the Conservation Committee. The water surrounded the bench, and it was an island. And I think a bench is the way to go. Don't invite a bunch of people. Invite somebody that likes to look at the falls. The end. Love me. I'm out for the night.
Thanks, Barb.
I think that's a great story, and I think that made me kind of feel like I want to keep the picnic tables, because there might be someone who has that same story about the picnic table, right?
Well, I know
There could be someone who has that same story about having, like, oh, that's where we got engaged, or where we, had our first whatever as a married couple, or or took our wedding photos. That picnic table's in the background or something. So I think it would be hard for me to. Sorry, I'm sorry, Pam. Good.
I was just going to say, I've seen several summers in a row now, large groups of like Arabic, Galabea wearing hijab groups there, and they're very respectful, but it's so nice to see them, and they come in a large group. So that's why I have to admit, I'm kind of a little torn too.
It seemed to me that we were in general agreement about keeping the picnic tables for the time being, and when it does come time to replace them, if they deteriorate at some point, that we consider the benefits of replacing them with benches.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like a good idea based on the surveys, because, folks, I know my mother would appreciate a bench. So thinking of elderly folks and everything as well. So yeah, keeping them for now.
So everyone's okay with that recommendation?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So I'll make that motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. And any further discussion? All right. All those in favor, Ben?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Ken?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. All right. So I said we would check back in at 8:45. It's 8:47. The education one, to me, seems like something where there would be a fair amount of discussion. Although I think in general, we're, as the Conservation Commission, generally in support of most, if not all of these. But there were several comments within the emails that we shared. I don't know. Yeah, again, I don't want to keep everyone until 9:30. I would like to think we could get it done in the next 12 minutes, but I'm not entirely confident about that.
I think the big thing on this was just making sure that we know who's going to do what, and like what you all are already doing in terms of, signage and etiquette things. Just providing input from the surveys to you all. And then if you need help, others might be willing to help you.
Well, Emily, basically Jackson has a litter ordinance, and it also has a noise ordinance. So I think it's fairly easy for the commission to put in, you know, no boom boxes and that sort of stuff. When you read the noise ordinance, I think it's defensible under that. Others may disagree.
Yeah, I would disagree with that reading, but
Yeah, well, it's funky the way it's written, because it says from what, 10 at night till 6 in the morning. Then,
and it's specific about noise that you can hear inside a house.
I think it also says on the outside, yeah, and here I guess we just want legal opinion whether it could be enforced. And if it can't be, then we would need, you know, the selectmen's assistance on that. And the same is true with alcohol. The town does not have any ordinances right now about alcohol. If we were to go in that particular direction, the question is just, you know, who's empowered to make that regulation?
Okay.
Well, and then I guess just if we can do it quickly regarding the sign, we're working on a sign already, right? And we would want to make sure that the signage is clear between the two groups here, that, right? I mean, who's making the sign? Like, who's the
Exactly.
signsmith? Because I think in our last meeting we said, well, maybe we should hold off a little bit before finalizing what we were thinking we were doing until we knew what they were doing.
Well, that's why I thought, let's, you know, here's some thoughts, and yeah, you all are well on your way to putting something together. This is what we heard from the survey, so whatever makes sense. But definitely we need to sort of confirm and bring it forward with the selectmen in terms of the noise and the alcohol. I mean, the enforceability of all of this. It's more kind of a, well, there's, yeah, obviously suggestions to, you know, make everyone stay at the falls enjoyable.
But if we're going to be doing a sign that's going to go out this coming summer, we need resolution of these. We can't keep kicking the can down the road.
Right. So if you have something to share with the falls committee that, I mean, that we could look at, or if you bring it to the select board for their approval, I guess it's the process piece, not clear on.
So based on the comments that were provided prior to the meeting through email, as well as the recommendations that are summarized here by the committee, I've just briefly written up what I hope might be a recommendation that would be supported by the Conservation Commission, given that we have, you know, just a few minutes before 9 p.m. And I think Ken's point makes sense that we should probably address this in some way so we can move forward. Mm-hmm. And what I've written is that the CC would recommend the development of educational materials to include outreach to advertising firms and businesses, pamphlets and brochures, as well as signage, and would recommend the inclusion of etiquette recommendations rather than rules that require enforcement within the educational materials. And then the Conservation Commission is developing educational signage to implement at the falls, and we'll work with the committee and the town to complete/implement. And then the final one being explore the feasibility and potential funding of a falls host program. There's probably more to it than that, but I'm trying to come up with a fairly succinct way to say that we support all the educational efforts here.
I think that looks good. I think, again, just reiterating that however you all might need help on these, there are people who are poised to be a part of this work moving forward. So
the only thing that I would want to say about this, and just because I'm not on the falls committee when maybe this gets discussed later on, is just looking a little bit at how we deem what's appropriate for other users and not in regards to how they interact with the natural world. So I just think that we need to be very mindful in our wording about, oh, only quiet enjoyment or no radios. There's a lot of, I've been to quite a few like DEI and Jedi trainings lately that talk a little bit about social justice and the environment and what we deem appropriate. And so I would just think a little bit about that, like our role and obviously there's enforcement for safety, there's enforcement for ecological damage. There's also, visitor use and making sure we're not detrimental to other people's visits, but thinking a little bit about some of that wordage, so just quiet enjoyment, no radio, that gets, in my opinion, just to kind of a little bit of a gray area as to how we are interacting with others and what sort of constructs we're building with how they interact with the outdoors, if that makes sense. And I'm happy to talk to the Falls Committee more about that, if that all sounds too vague. I can be more specific in a non-public setting, I feel like, a non-recorded public setting.
No, I mean, that I totally, yeah, to be aware of that is what's going to be really key. And certainly the trainings, it sounds like you've been through, and that's where working together to be thoughtful of what everybody thinks they should, how they have fun in the outdoors. Because sometimes I make a lot of noise up here. New Year's Eve, no. So, sounds good.
Thank you all. You are all amazing, and your thoughts, your additions are so perfect. And the one thing that I only wish is that we can work together to make this really, really happen. So thank you for all you do, and Happy New Year, everybody.
Same to you, Barbara.
Yeah,
Barbara, I can't even see you.
So I'm not sure whether we finalized our recommendation there. Mike, I did just add ensure materials are inclusive / considerate of various user groups, and obviously that's something that could be expanded upon. But the educational components do strike me as something that the Conservation Commission would work directly on, either with the committee or not, and that would be something that falls well within the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission, whether we do it ourselves or we find funding to develop those materials similar to what we're doing for the signage, and that in addition to helping develop or explore the feasibility of a falls host program seem like things that would fall well within our jurisdiction and responsibilities and things that we would support. Is there any issue with the recommendation as I've written it up? I can read it out again. That would be helpful. I won't say it's perfect, and I can, like I said, wordsmith it a little bit more, but
it's good.
CC recommends development of educational materials to include outreach to advertising and businesses, pamphlets, brochures, signage, inclusion of etiquette requirement or recommendations rather than rules that require enforcement within educational materials. Ensure materials are inclusive and considerate of various user groups. CC is developing educational signage to implement at the Falls and will work with the committee in the town. And CC recommends exploring feasibility and potential funding of Falls host program.
Jeff, I think the only question that I have on this is I feel at times we keep kicking the can down the road, but if Mike is really going to put a sign together, we're going to get it out by springtime, we need to start to get specific.
Yeah, agreed. Mike, I'd be happy to
talk about all possibilities, but at some point, if this is actually going to, the signing is going to be implemented, which is one of your key educational tools, we do need to figure out how to get specific.
I do also think there's the question of because originally this kiosk was kind of just like the welcome thing. So I think, and we wanted to keep it very simple. So I think that there is maybe some discussion around what it looks like now. And we have the map for it is basically done. Megaprint, I've contacted them. We have the materials and the pricing all picked out. It's really just, yeah, like Ken said, figuring out if there's any specific rules or specific items to note that need to be front and center. You pull up, there's a kiosk. These are the things that you need to know no matter what while you're there.
Mike, would it make sense to try to schedule a meeting at some point in the next few weeks? If you have availability to include, I'd be happy to sit in on it, as well as any members of the Save Jackson Falls committee that want to provide some insight on what might be included. Does that make sense? And then we could potentially bring it to or bring a more formalized concept to the February meeting.
I think that's a great idea.
I'd be happy to take part in that. That helps.
Great.
So maybe after this, I'll send her out an email. So Jeff, Emily, myself, and anyone else that wants to be a subcommittee meeting. Sounds great.
That's
Okay, great. Can we just take a vote to make this recommendation quickly? Unless there are any other comments or additions to it. All right, so I'll make the motion
Let's do it.
to approve those recommendations. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor, Ben,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Ken,
Yes.
Mike,
Aye.
Pam,
Yes.
and I'm an aye, or a yes. Okay, so that one is approved. There are two very minor things that I want to get to before everyone leaves. It shouldn't take more than 5 minutes if everyone can stick around real quick. The first one is just reporting for the conservation easement monitoring. I think that's due on January 15th. So if anyone who hasn't submitted their report yet could do so, that would be great. And I can go on and check just to get an updated idea of who has and who hasn't, or if anyone needs help, let me know. The second thing is, I just wanted to bring up, we did receive a letter from an organization called the Saco Headwaters Alliance, which, out of full disclosure, I'm also part of as a board member. But it's essentially an outreach. They're looking to help municipalities through the Upper Saco watershed in developing protections and regulations and ordinances, and generally assessing threats to water resources within that municipality's jurisdiction. And so this is just an initial outreach, essentially saying, are you interested in hearing a presentation from the organization? If so, when would it make sense for us to come to a meeting? And what are the things that are important or that you would like to see happen within your community? So it's a very basic response to fill out, and I'm happy to do that. I have spoken to Mark Dindorf, who is leading the effort on behalf of the Saco Headwaters Alliance, and essentially said that he wanted to come, or they were hoping to come at some point in January. And I said, our meeting was pretty full already. Would a presentation in February work for you? He said that was fine. And so my thought was just to, within this response, just say, please plan to present at our February meeting. I can share this flyer around if you folks haven't seen it. I wasn't sure whether Julie sent it to the larger Conservation Commission or not, but yeah, if any of you have thoughts on what we could fill out for our priorities regarding water resources, you can just send it to me by email and I can include it on this forum. I just wanted to get approval to go ahead and basically complete this forum and ask Mark to see if they'd like to present at our February meeting.
Jeff, I would like to see the presentation. The question I have is, if we're going to spend time going through the Prospect Farm review to get that moving.
Yep.
History has shown us that we probably can't do both of those, and I'm a little nervous of pushing that way off. And if this is not super time sensitive, I would suggest we approach this one in March.
I think that would be fine. Mark did express that they were flexible, and he said, you know, if it needs to be after town meeting time, that would be fine too. And I know that Bill Terry, on behalf of the planning board, had indicated that, you know, the planning board would be interested. They've looked at the New Hampshire model groundwater ordinance in the past, and when see that as somewhat of a priority. And I think, Dick, you had gotten an email from Mark as well. So
Yep.
I think maybe pushing it to March or April makes sense. And given that town meeting is in March, maybe we could just say April and plan on doing it then. Does that make sense?
I'd be fine with that.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll fill out the form and send it around. And if anyone wants to add anything to, you know, the list of priorities, I'll also send it to you, Dick, and to Bill to see if we can kind of just coordinate and get on the same page. I think Bill had mentioned that he thought this seemed like something the Conservation Commission could lead, at least this initial response.
Yep.
Okay. That sounds good. Any other items to discuss this evening or public comment?
Jeff, just a quick question. You're going to send me those notes and everything that I can then give to Barbara to share out with the committee?
Yes, and I'll edit them a little bit just so they're a little bit more presentable and make sure all the spelling and grammar is there. So I'll send that your way.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else? All right, well, I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting at 9:05.
Second.
All right. All those in favor, Ben?
Yes.
Brian?
No.
All right, you can stay. Ken?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Pam?
Yes.
And I'm an aye, so the ayes will take Brian's no, and the meeting is adjourned.
Brian, you've been outvoted.
Finally.
All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Hey, great job, Jeff.
Thanks, have a good night.
Do it.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.